this is Eileen from the Philippines. I'm sorry for not being able to join you today, but I hope this presentation will productively contribute to what RiAP has ambitiously planned for this year. Um, so I put in a small photo of myself just so you would hopefully get convinced this isn't a bot speaking to you. And having said that, let's begin. 7 years ago, when I finally ventured into committing to print what was then almost over 2 decades of research, the art historian I was supposedly becoming had to awkwardly reckon with writing on performance art from the Philippines, despite yawning gaps in data. Since digital technology had kicked in about three-fourths into that research, some headway did occur, but the problem really was much more than a mere function of the absence of documentation. There was the form itself in flux, the tactical and sometimes deliberate failings of memory, both of those who undertook the actions and witnessed them, the inability of archival indices to keep access open enough so that much more than singular readings could operate, and perhaps most felt was the finite aspect of the traces of action, which kept work from being approached through the far too many ways in which performance is sensed and embodied. That all said, I was prevailed upon to peg performance, prevailed upon to peg one bookmark for the study to the 1960s, also the time I was wrapping up in 2011. This assignment of RiAP to extend that summoning of anxiety about art history has not diminished my misgivings, but I hope you get a patent sense of my hesitation to pin down what is Philippine, as much as I refuse to pin down what constitutes performance here. And so we begin. Do indulge me with just a very quick preface to the period 1998 to 2018. I honestly don't think I can do justice to 2 decades of work in half an hour, so let me just attempt to give you a hopefully rich enough slice of practices I've come across. So, for all intents and purposes, we need to begin with the work of the Infanterie David Medalla, now the elderly statesman of Philippine performance art, despite the residual impishness that got him exiled away from the country under the Marcoses. It was in Medalla's fairly early adult life in Europe that his venturing into participation art and the burgeoning libertarian movements of the time in which much of his practice has been framed historically. Meanwhile, back as the country's democratic sphere was narrowing, a definitively post-war patriotism was setting directions previously unexplored in the work of various artists. In this slide, we find the since restaged Cassette's 100 performance, set into motion by portable radios, brought to play by the musicologist Jose Maceda, enabled by the help of many others, notably the conceptual artist Roberto Chabet. Much of the martial law years was arguably informed by an aspirational jingoism, coupled with an earnest search for creative space. Such as Jean-Marie Sejuco, in this slide, would interminably mesh a primeval impetus with unpremeditated dalliances with anachronistic influences. She began as an installation artist of a minimalist temperament, but her performances were undoubtedly maximalist in impact. By the late 1990s, this would surface in her series evoking Filipina migrant workers and the plight of those displaced by the seminal volcanic eruption, which finally drove the Americans from their military bases in the Philippines. Meanwhile, up in northern Luzon were a group of artists working out of the mountain town of Baguio, with its tribal communities providing anchors for their installative and performative work. This is Roberto Villanueva, taken from a video of his final performance called Ego's Grave at the first Asia-Pacific Triennale in Queensland. The urban centers such as Manila were then in the throes of a mild building boom, and individuals affiliating with emerging artist spaces like Quezon Banal's Third Space would launch guerrilla actions, such as this parody beauty parade in one of the major megamalls. Around this time in Southeast Asia, mobility among young artists or allowing them to discover a confluence of anxieties across the continent. Here we see Lira Garciliano symbolically apportioning land at the Indonesian Visual Art Archive, where she had been in residency. At the same time, Suartuazon, like most city dwellers coming from elsewhere, would negotiate their shift in dwelling sensibilities by tapping into local or homegrown festival language. As seen in this work, rural scenes revisited, done for the first time around the premier university campus in 2004. Leo Cruz, who has participated in RiAP previously, is shown here around the time that performance art as form to be reckoned with by art institutions was becoming more undeniable. Cruz would go on to do work that surfaced how the Catholic Church remained a force to tangle with. Gwen Kalubayan, shown here, also taught at the school Cruz graduated from. Here, Kalubayan opts to intervene in everyday spaces to act upon religion's repressive tendencies. This iconoclastic stance eventually got him booted out of teaching at the University of Santo Tomas. The opening of channels for more artists to enact ideas beyond Philippine platforms is indicated here by Raquel de Loyola in a performance called Satisfaction done in Germany in 2008. So it's basically her binging on American junk food and performing the hyperactivity that brings on. So invoking this global trafficking of bodies is simultaneously driven by internal displacement, here addressed through Boyet de Mesa's work with the Urban Poor Federation Kadamay or Kindred, mobilizing communities threatened by the supposed cleaning up of a major urban floodway. The relationship between the state and the diversity-oriented local art world came to a head when the then President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo sought to canonize her own set of artist laureates. The case against this presidential meddling was eventually won by artists at the Supreme Court. Here we find elder artist, more popularly known as an abstract painter, Alfredo Leongoren, doing a morning ritual in front of the State Cultural Office. This tangling with official narratives has challenged artists across fields to take upon the narrativizing by occupying memorial sites. Here we have site-specific performance makers, Sipatlawin and Sam, reversing the steps taken by the national hero Jose Rizal as he was marched to his execution site a century prior. Meanwhile, outlier sites like Baguio would reinvigorate its core with a new generation of artists who would take on from where elders Santiago Bose and Villanueva left off. Here we see John Frank Sabado in his continuing work as eco-warrior, Crossing the Pecha Bridge, installed by another Baguio Arts founder and performance artist Rene Acatana for the Access Festival of 2012. The desire to wrest themselves away from the homogenizing influence of meanwhile is taken on by the young artist Adrian Vergara, here in her tragic comic performance of the mascot Yen Yen de Sarapin, which riffs off from her own recent past as mascot performer, tending to infantilize children's entertainment. Further afield in Mindanao, we have from Cagayan de Oro the artist Nick Aka, who has played up his ability to pass off as street vagrant to touch on prickly questions of equity and access. This is a solidarity performance for farmers displaced in Kidapawan in Mindanao. In the past 2 decades, many more artists have sought to explore questions of artistic labor, and Isa Hoxon is among those who has, for instance, propped up how the Filipino body is seen as malleable and docile, but sometimes also able to speak back.
I'm
So that is Isa performing with another artist, Ras Ligtas, both of them alluding to the way Filipinos have been very aggressively engaged in such ventures as Disneyland in various sites um, in other parallel entertainment ventures. Um, so I wish to end with this final slide documenting the collaboration of Nerissa Guevara and Demesa, whom we saw earlier in the community performance. Here we find them at the precipice of a seawall set against Manila Bay. As Demesa's head is straddled by a crafted spirit boat, Guevara casts a ghostly presence, metaphorically standing in for the now thousands of souls sacrificed in the name of President Duterte's drug war. Offering up blood to the waters of the already dirtied bay, they stand as silenced bodies aching to be felt and sensed. These unfolding stories beg many harrowing